welcome to the Q&A Cafe. It's good to see everyone after a bit of a pause in the action while winter took advantage of all of us, and I was occupied doing other things. But I'm very happy to be back here with the new show of the spring season, or what's the end of the spring season. And my guest is Patty Stonesifer, and this was a booking that we actually started on in October, I think, because I had the good fortune to get to talk to Patty at an event for the YPO, for the Young Presidents Organization. And while that wasn't on camera, it was with an audience of appropriate people. And I listened to your story, and I said to you that night, I've got to have you do a Q&A as soon as possible, not thinking it would take 6 months for us to get around to doing it. But welcome. It's good to see you again.
It's good to be here.
And Patty is so many things, and we'll take them step by step. But one of the principal reasons she's here is because she's the president and CEO of Martha's Table, which is a vital organization to our city. And I should also point out that as we're taping this, we've been in what seems like 100 days of monsoon outside. And in 2 weeks, Martha's Table is moving to its new digs. And the rain's having an impact on that. But why don't we start with you just telling us about this big move, because it's probably going to coincide with when this is on DC Cable.
That's good. Well, 38 years ago, Veronica Maas, with $83, opened Martha's Table at the corner of 14th and V, between V and W. And at that time, 14th Street was a place of great need. And she wanted to create a place that was, by her own definition, the nanny for the children in the neighborhood, a place of respite, and then very quickly became interested also in making sure that everyone, no matter their circumstances, could have a hot meal in the evenings. And someone donated a good humor truck, and thus began what is now known as McKenna's Wagon. And
that's how it got it.
It's how it's got its name.
And it's named after
Father McKenna, a fabulous Jesuit priest who had died shortly before that.
It was vital in the founding of the organization.
Yes, he was a big partner for Veronica at that time. And so what has happened since then is that as times change, Martha's Table has changed. And when I arrived at Martha's Table about 5.5 years ago,
2013 was it? Yeah.
Early 2013, I learned that the board had considered, do we still belong here on 14th Street? And
which had changed completely.
And continues to change.
Yes, right.
A wonderful place to get dinner, and most people are not looking for McKenna's Wagon.
A different kind of needy.
Yes, that's right. It's still an important transportation corridor, and so in terms of our services, our early childhood program, our lobby market, our clothing, no-cost clothing services, those were all full, but we were operating as a service organization with people coming to us, getting services, going back, and certainly alleviating some of their needs and hopefully improving their life.
To you, right?
90% of the children used to walk to Martha's Table. Today, not 9 of them do, right? They commute in some form or another. And so what we asked ourselves is, what is our future? And we realized that our future was standing with a community that was under-resourced to bring out the best assets of everyone in the community and to add our own assets, whether that is improved education or improved food or just the idea of wraparound supports for parents that are trying to raise healthy and productive children. And we realized we needed to go to a community that we would be welcomed and embraced in, and that community turned out to be
useful.
And that turned out to be the Hillsdale Fort Stanton neighborhood in Ward 8. The Horning family, Joe and Lynn Horning are the heads of that family, but they have wonderful children that are also involved, had held onto a piece of property in that neighborhood for 50 years, and they gifted us that property and the beginning cash we needed to build a new home for Martha's Table. So our headquarters, effective June of 2018,
right. Just about right now as you're watching,
will move from 14th Street to the Hillsdale Fort Stanton neighborhood. And that will be a wonderful opportunity for us to move from a services model, which we'll still do a lot of services, but to a community development, a place-based model that says we'll all be stronger if we work together to strengthen the children, to strengthen the institutions in the area, and our own work together. So we're looking for real new kinds of partnerships. That said, the board was loath to leave anyone behind, and that 14th Street heritage was really deep in their hearts, but I was convinced that we needed to do this in partnership with others, and so we are opening a satellite center still in Ward 1.
But not the same, not the building you've been in.
Not the same building.
Do you own that building? Are you selling it?
We are selling the 14th Street building in order to fund this expansion and
Probably
stabilize our
to a chic new
finances.
restaurant.
Yeah, I don't know who will end up in that building, but it is a great block.
Yeah.
But we'll be moving just down the street to 15th and Columbia Road with Jubilee Housing, who will have 64 units of housing above in this beautiful building called the Maycroft, and we will have early childhood services and food services right there for the people who live in the Maycroft and the other Jubilee housing services, but also for the others who are still in that neighborhood who look to us for food supports and education services.
Is the new location much bigger? Is it
It's
or comparable in size?
It's 43,000 square feet, and that's not a whole lot bigger than Martha's Table
I
on
guess
14th
I'm asking,
Street.
is there room to grow?
There is
there?
room to grow, and there's a piece of property right next to it that the Hornings are holding for what they envision as phase 2, and that may be growth from us. It may be other partners that we all decide we want to bring in close that could help make our work even better. So there's opportunity to grow in our building. And the most wonderful part is it's a building that was designed for the work we do. We love 14th Street, but you all who have been there know you go in and out doors. We have 7 front doors on 14th Street because we were an auto body shop and a street front church, and the board bought little pieces of that property along the way. And so having a building that is in a neighborhood that embraces us, that is designed for children and parents to thrive, is a real opportunity.
Is it a church-related organization, or is it just a coincidence that a Jesuit was involved in the founding? Because the name is related to the Bible.
Well, I had to look this up when I interviewed for the job. And when I go down 14th Street, people call me Martha all the time. So there's a lot of curiosity about why is it Martha's Table. And Martha was the one in the kitchen when Jesus was out entrancing everyone with his great words, and her sister was out with the disciples and all of the visitors. And when she mentioned that she felt alone in the kitchen and possibly ignored in the kitchen, he emphasized that that was the place of greatest value, that was the place of service. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Veronica Maas, who was a Georgetown sociology professor, and Father McKenna, so it's not exactly a coincidence, but it is not a religious-based organization. It's inspired by that idea.
Right.
No, it's inspired by the idea of Martha's service in the kitchen.
How many staff do you have now compared to then? How many people?
Well, the story I love the
I
best,
should be asking
I think
staff
it was
and volunteers,
Veronica at that point, and the story was she had under $90, and the first meal they didn't have any spoons, and she sent she told a woman, you need to go get spoons, and she said, look at this neighborhood, I can't get any spoons, and she said, ask everyone for 1 spoon. And the woman came back with enough spoons, because everybody will give you 1 spoon, right? It's all about being able to relate to the need, right? And that everyone can give something. So we have more than a dozen spoons now. We have about 100 staff. Over half of those are in classrooms every day.
This is paid staff.
This is paid staff.
And you're a volunteer CEO.
I am a volunteer, but because I had an exceptional opportunity earlier in life to not worry about my salary. And so, yes, we have about 100 staff, about half of which are teachers. Another dozen or so are food educators and market leaders that run the markets that we have in 39 elementary schools all over town, and then the rest of us are fundraisers and accountants and community engagement folks and communications folks to make the rest of the work go round.
How will you let the community know you're there? Do you have events planned?
No, it's a great question because there's nothing like throwing a party and no one showing up, right? I was a little bit worried about that
we've all done
today
that.
because of the rain. But we will start with actually on the 31st of May. We have been going door to door with flyers to the neighbors who put up with the dirt and the dust and the construction, because you've got to start by saying, come see it. You want to see it. So we'll have a very informal embrace the immediate neighbors thing before we ever even move in. And then on June the 23rd, we'll have a wonderful community event that we hope folks from our old community and folks from the new community, that will have everything from face painting
like
to
an
music
open house?
to, yes, but with a lot more fun and delicious food. We're really good about food.
You know your food. You know your food.
So we'll have a big community opening. The ribbon cutting itself is on June the 7th. So thankfully Mayor Bowser will come and we'll do what you do
and there
at
won't be
ribbon
any
cuttings.
rain left. There can't possibly be any
We
rain
decided
left.
today
so
it needed to be inside.
Well, I
We
don't
just
know.
no optimism there.
We might be in a cycle. Who knows? How do you approach the mother or father or senior citizen? Because you also, you're helping the neediest young and you're helping the neediest old as well. Who's ambivalent or timid about coming into you or reaching out to you? What do you say to them?
Well, the beauty of it is that so few people are timid. They might be nervous about what to say and what to do,
Yeah.
but 18,000 times a year people come and give of their time and energies as volunteers. We save over $1 million in cost by having the chopping of the meal that goes out on the van at night and the driving of that van and the distribution of those, all volunteer driven. These 39 joyful markets that we run every single month in schools, 2 Martha's Table staff and 20 volunteers. Maybe half of those from the community and the school, the other half from Bethesda and Chevy Chase and Petworth and all over the city. So what we tell people is just come do the thing that you're most comfortable with, and then just start to ask a few questions, because we all want to be seen. That's the most respect that you can give anyone, whether that person is in a situation where they need no-cost groceries, or they're arriving at McKenna's wagon, or they're bringing their child for early childhood education. We want to be seen, and the thing that so many of us do when we're uncomfortable is we look away, right? And so the biggest thing we tell people is just see the person and ask, what are you going to do with this corn? Or why do you love this pasta? And what's her favorite color? It's the same thing,
approach,
the same thing that we would do anywhere else, which is make the connection, because we're all half full and half empty, right? So many times we think, oh, well, we're lucky, we have so much, we'll pour that out and give some of that to others. But the truth is, the people that we stand with every day, they are very rich lives and wonderful experiences and a lot to share. And the real exchange is when we recognize that we both have assets and we both have needs. And you standing with me can really change my assets too, because I learn and I grow and I enjoy. And the same thing happens on the other side of that exchange.
Let's say I'm a person who's living next door to a family that I think needs the help of Martha's Table. How does that help get to them? Do you need them to come to you, or do you constantly go around and knock on doors and say, we're here, do you need us, can we help you?
We don't knock on doors. And you're right about something that's implied in your question, which is there is a stigma to seeking out help,
asking for help,
which is one of the reasons our joyful food markets are so wonderful, because they've normalized the idea that once a month in every elementary school east of the river, there will be at the 3 o'clock bell, Chef Jojo chopping garlic and making a healthy lo mein that the kids are helping with, and there'll be a food festival of sorts at which you can pick up the groceries that you might need and want, and the fresh greens and the other healthy options. And it doesn't feel like you got in line at a food bank. And so for us, we try to say that dignity is more than not charging. It is about approaching people with the joy of life. And so we call those our joyful food markets because it sets a bar for how we behave and for how the experience is felt. So by meeting people where they are, in the schools, at the rec centers, in other places, it keeps from this the idea and the stigma of saying, I need to go find something at Martha's table. We say, we go where you are, and hopefully we'll come together that way.
Yeah.
Now, our early childhood program is full of parents who work. So these are working parents that have their hand on that rung and are climbing the same ladder that our children are, which is trying to get work and continue to progress in their education and their work. And yet early childhood education is so expensive and an essential part of leveling the playing field, of giving every child their greatest opportunity. It costs $24,000 a year to go to early childhood.
Right.
And
what
so
it costs
we
the family,
provide
was
it.
$40,000 if you have 2 children?
Right, right. So we provide that, and we get a subsidy from the district that pays about half of the cost of what of that education,
so
and then
much
we
of-
fundraise for the rest.
Yeah, I was going to say, so much, so you're very, very dependent on fundraising and contributions.
75% of our
Right,
costs
right.
come from individuals and
exist
family
without it.
foundations.
And you have a very sophisticated and impressive, I think, series of programs to ramp that up. For example, your sips and suppers, the dinners you have in the wintertime, that I've been fortunate to attend some of those. And then you have, I don't know if it's still at the museum, it used to be at the museum, the big event where it's open to many more people where they can
That's
come.
the sips of the sips and
of the
supper.
sips and suppers. But
The brainchild of Joan Nathan, as
yes,
well as Alice
exactly.
Waters and Jose Andres.
right. But it's just as easy to go to your website and click on being able to donate.
Thank you. And this is actually the time of year where, we always say that both taxes and faith have the fourth quarter be a very robust
Right.
period of fundraising, but we all bite our nails while waiting for that fourth quarter. So here in the summertime, hunger is up and families need the surrounding supports, but that's often a lull in fundraising. So we love for people to consider how are their neighbors spending their summers, and might they be able to help by supporting Martha's Table or the other organizations that do great work.
And this is, you may be a volunteer CEO and president, but this is full-time work for you, isn't
It's
it?
more than full-time.
Yeah, a friend of yours
that's really
said to me,
challenging.
she's the first one in and the last one out. And
I'm the first one up. That's for sure.
But it's a high
It's
energy.
something about the age, I think. I don't sleep
it's
as
high.
much.
So let's go back a little bit in your life, because it is the journey of how you got there. And to jump ahead a little bit, I'll just say that you came from a large family in the Midwest, Catholic family, where your father instilled in you very young the idea of giving and going to help the neediest.
My mother too, but my father was
But it
very
was-
present. Yeah.
But I believe you've talked about hopping in the family
Yeah.
station wagon
Yeah,
and
yeah.
whoever
There were
was
9
driving.
kids. She was a
9
little busy.
kids. Where were you? Where were you? Were you
I'm
in
the 6th of 9. So
Sixth, so
our
kind
joke about that is that in Italian families, they call the group in the middle in the sauce. But in Irish Catholic families, you don't want to use that expression. So.
Oh, well. But back before any of us knew the word Microsoft or where our world was going with computer technology and the internet and whatnot, you were, I think, the number 20 hire by Bill Gates at
Well,
Microsoft.
I think it was a little higher number than that, but it was still a very small
It
organization.
was, yeah. And I think he had only, maybe 2 billion then? No.
I don't even know if
If he
it
had
was
$1 billion,
that. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, how did you and Bill Gates find each other?
Well, I am from Indiana, as you said, and I was running a startup computer book publisher that was cleaning the clock of the Microsoft computer book publisher. Microsoft had a little press.
in Indiana.
Yeah, but we were hungry, and we
Yeah.
did really good work, and were able to work with authors and to do books about computers. And so I met the folks at Microsoft because we were doing books about Microsoft products, but most of our big sellers were Lotus 123 and WordPerfect and others, and Microsoft was still scrapping, trying. They were number 2 or number 3 in so many areas at that time. But they asked me about coming out. I was 30 years old, and they had started to
And
look
you had
for.
children.
I had 2 children.
You had 2 children, and you were divorced or getting divorced?
No, I was married.
You were married.
And I did eventually divorce, so you have that right, but it was later.
Later.
And they
But you had a
asked me
full
to
life
come out.
going
I had a
on.
very full life, and my family was there. So when you have young children, it's often great to be near where your family is.
Yeah.
But I was entranced with the people I met at Microsoft. They were just so smart.
So you
and
went
this
to
computer
Seattle.
on every desk. I got on a plane and went for the interview, and I looked around and said, "This
it
is
one
where I want to
building?
raise my." This is where, and so I
This is
wasn't
home.
so smart that I thought Microsoft was going to be mega. I thought it was going to be great. I really believed in the power of personal computing, as they did too. But I knew that was a wonderful place for my children to grow up. And so we made that move across the country, and that was a wonderful move. And I was in the book publishing division, ran that division for a very short period of time. And then I went and ran Microsoft Canada, and I came back and ran Microsoft
What was
Technical
the hierarchy
Support.
then? Did I hear you say that Melinda Gates, she wasn't Gates then, worked
Melinda
for
French.
you?
Yes.
Worked for you.
Melinda worked for me, and then when I ran the...
Did you introduce them, or did they already know each other?
No, they met very early on, and I remember actually meeting Melinda at a dinner. But it was interesting. I mean, they dated for years.
Did you
right?
know they were dating?
Oh yes.
Or did they keep
They were
it-
very good at disclosing to me, and
Okay.
I did that
Full
calculation
transparency.
about. Well, she'd already been dating him before she actually started working for me, and I remember doing the calculation about. Was I better off being discussed at the breakfast table? And I decided yes, that there was some downsides to that, but most of it's upside. So and it turned out to have quite a bit of upside.
But you were very close to them.
And
You
yes.
you were first tier family
Yes.
of the Microsoft beginnings.
And there weren't a lot of women, as there aren't today, I'm afraid, still, in the executive ranks. And so I'd always tell I'd tell people that I'd sit in the executive staff meetings, but the only one with young children and the only woman at the table. Far too often, I would have this Sesame Street song, "Which of these things is not like the others," going on in my head all the time. But I think it kept me grounded and kept me a truth teller in an environment where that was valued. And it's something that Bill values and Melinda
Right.
values, is that I'm very connected to both my family and to society in a way that they valued. And so it was when I was ready to leave there after great success, and I was the most senior woman there and running the interactive media division, but I was getting ready to turn 40, and
Yeah.
I thought I've made more money than I ever thought, and it's time for me to do something new.
Were you like so many people of that era? Because I had a friend who was early at AOL, where one day somebody told you what you were worth and you had no idea you'd become worth that much money?
Well, I remember the first time that we ever even really talked about money and about philanthropy at an executive staff meeting, and everyone sat around and said, "How much money would you need where you wouldn't need any more?" And we had a very concrete conversation about you can only buy so many socks, and for those who like cars, you can only
Did you
buy
each
so many
get to
cars.
put a number on it?
Yeah, well, it was more of a theoretical discussion.
Yeah.
But that was the first time that I heard Bill say, and this was long before they made the money that they have today. I heard him say, but you get to give it all back to the society that helped you build it, right? That's the obligation, but it's also going to be fun, right? That's an interesting part, was you figure out
You'll
how to
have
use that
enough
money
and-
again. You bring it in, you buy the socks you need, you take the rest of it and return it as it should be to society in some form or another. Put it to use. Don't let it sit. And that was a realization that I had from the very beginning, because I came from a family
Right.
where
Giving was-
literally every spare thing we had
Was
went
put to
back
use, or- Put
back into society.
Looking back on it, what was the rate of growth, the speed of growth? What was it like for you, and how did you cope with it? And did you notice things happening really fast in your sector? Just Microsoft itself. I mean, it was going leaps and bounds and growing bigger and becoming more vital and important and competitive. Did you sense that being inside it?
We did, but one of the graces and the challenges of Microsoft was that we were in Seattle, as you said earlier. And in Seattle, it's a bit of a bubble. And so we ended up, that bubble hurt us with people in Washington, D.C., thinking different things about us than we thought about ourselves, right? Because we were talking to ourselves a lot.
Right.
And so a little bit is protected, right? I mean, even today, the Gateses can go down the street and people just say, "Hi, Bill." They don't bother him. It's a special community.
Maybe it's part of the transparency or being real.
Yeah. It is a community that it values the work, but really values the environment and play and children. And so we did realize it was growing fast, but we kept subdividing the work amongst other talented people and felt that there was so much talent in this world we could tap into, that that growth. It's been almost, to be honest, more astonishing to watch Amazon grow, which I've been lucky enough to be part of.
Yes, and you're on the board at Amazon.
And have been for 22 years
So are you
now.
going to tell us whether they're moving here? Do you get to vote on that?
No, actually, there's a really good process in place, and they've been out visiting cities. I will say that while I don't get to vote on it, I did get a chance to look at the 200 plus applications that came in, and it would just make you feel so good about America, that cities where the government came together with business and the civic sector and said, what can we do to make this a great place for not just Amazon, but for companies to come together. And I literally, we went around this conference room looking at all these wonderful proposals, and it just made you want to sing God Bless America. I mean, it was just wonderful, because small towns and big towns and all kinds of towns were coming together and saying, this can be a good place for young people and old people to come together and create something special.
Do you feel you work as closely with Jeff Bezos as you worked with Bill Gates, or is it completely different situations?
Well, Bill and Melinda and I, we kind of grew up together.
And Melinda,
so
right.
The experience with them was a little bit different, because we worked all day, every day together at Microsoft. And then as I got to build the Gates Foundation, we were in the world of possibilities. I talk about, having a blank sheet of paper and their commitment to return almost all their assets to society, and then what do you do? And those are conversations that are absolutely wonderful. And the experience with Jeff has been fantastic. And I think I'm probably equally personally close to Jeff, but he's running this massive empire while I'm running Martha's Table, right? And I am hoping that I help and advise and certainly represent the shareholders on the board, but I'm not in there every day with him the way that I was with Bill and Melinda for 10 years at Microsoft and 10 plus years at the foundation.
We read a lot about them, both, all three of them. For you personally, are there anecdotes, are there moments, is there some way they did something that you picked up and applied to your own life? And I don't mean just in philanthropy, I just mean a way of going about business or a way of dealing with colleagues. Was there something about them that you took away, Bill, Melinda, Jeff, that just makes them unique, and you thought, I want to do that. I like that they do that. I want to do that too.
Well, Jeff Bezos, you've got to always carry that joy in the day experience that he has. That laugh is not forced. That laugh is real. He gets the joke, and he gets the beauty, and he gets the wonder, and
right.
he whether that wonder is in a museum or is in a business meeting, a great idea, a new innovation. So he has this kind of
openness
stay aware of the wonder that is just a real gift. And I don't know about you, but I do my gratitudes these days and try to always remember. But that comes to Jeff naturally. He has very, very high standards and challenges people to do great work, but he's open to the wonder of it all, to learning and seeing and experiencing and laughing and enjoying it. Both Bill and Melinda have that kind of fierce determination to get the right answer and get things done. That certainly Jeff has too, but I think that fierceness was part of the Microsoft culture, and that cultures often start at the top. And that I used to say about Bill that he was like playing tennis with someone that plays dramatically better than you, but suddenly your game is a lot better because just being on the court and you're stretching in every possible way. And so I think that one of Bill's gifts is that your game is just better because you're looking at things from every possible angle and trying new ways to consider things. And then I think Melinda makes us all better in that she really does think about the whole 360 of the of certainly it's about vaccines or it's about reproductive health, but it's really about families and it's really about children. It's about a healthy and productive life. So she has this ability to get up on the balcony and look down and be sure that you're encompassing the whole story. And I try to take that approach.
Does she bring that to her relationship with him? Did you find them to be, parts that needed to come together to make a whole? Did they bring something to each other that the other didn't have?
The cliche is people say he's the head and she's the heart, but the truth is he has a very big heart. He wouldn't be spending all of his money this way otherwise, and she has a very big head. I will point out that in that family there are 2 degrees and they both belong to her. Yeah. Right? So she has both.
And you say that as a college dropout yourself,
yes,
correct?
Although I did go back.
You did go back, you did. Okay, but Bill Gates never did he?
Well, I got mine from Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne Extension.
Congratulations.
Now, Bill and I and Melinda all have a series of honorary degrees to our name, so it's starting to even out a little bit. But
tell me this about
she's really super smart, and no one should ever forget that. So they're like any couple. There's a little yin and yang, and then sometimes they're just completely in accord.
But you were about to leave Microsoft, I believe, and then they had another idea for what you should do.
Yes.
Talk about that.
I actually had left. I had accepted a position. I'd done my Microsoft thing. I'd made more money. I decided it was time to lift my head up and decide what next. And I had a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old.
So what was this, like 10 years in?
10 years in is just about it. I had a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old, and the one thing you know when you have kids that age is that kitchen counter time is almost more important because they're not going to come ask you things. You need to just be in the path.
You're never going to get it back.
You need to be in the path, right? And so I decided it was time for me to go. I always say that even the best jobs have a sell-by date, and I recognize that sell-by date. You kind of, take out the cream and think, not so much. And I was feeling that way. I wanted to invest more in my family. And so we had a big going away party, and Bill made this really heartfelt speech. And as he got off stage, I said, I'm sure someday we'll work together again.
Meet again?
And he said, come talk to me on Monday. And I said, no, I can't. I already told DreamWorks, Jeff Katzenberg and Steven Spielberg that I would do. No. I had done a joint venture with them when I was at Microsoft, and so they'd asked me to help them with this animation firm they'd purchased, and they were getting ready to do a lot of animated films. And so I said yes.
Were you planning to move to?
No, I had rented a funky space above a pizza restaurant and put in couches and other things, and I'd go down to San Francisco one day a week and then do the rest from Redmond, Washington, and be at that kitchen counter. So I'd already moved on, and I say someday I'll write my 12 Weeks in Hollywood book, because that's how long it was. By the time I actually went and sat down and talked to Bill about he said come visit, and so idea? He had a couple of things, and he said, look, we're ready to, we watched Microsoft do this thing with libraries, and what we think it should be private and we should take it much bigger. What would you do? And I said, well, you do all of them. You just do all the libraries. And his answer to me was, in the United States or in the world? And so I thought, I maybe should do this because the scale of his ambition, this was about connecting libraries to the internet, and I'd worked my whole life on technology and on the power of technology to level the playing field, especially microcomputing to level the playing field between, children who have access to the Encyclopedia Britannica and children who have access to Encarta. Now Wikipedia, right? Encarta's long gone, but at that time. And so the idea that we could connect every library in the United States and then begin to wonder about the world, and that their ambition for philanthropy was like that. And he said, look, we need a partner. And so after a couple of conversations with him and Melinda and Bill Sr., who had already been doing, Bill Gates Sr., a lovely man, had already been doing some philanthropy literally out of a cardboard box in his basement. I agreed to start the Library Foundation, which we then merged into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation about a year and a half later. That DreamWorks space was converted to the Gates Library Foundation, and every weekend we just moved desks closer together and closer together in that space.
And you, in effect, became the first head of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
I was the CEO.
And you were there how many years?
About 13 all told, and then I continue to follow the amazing things that have happened, but the 13 includes the Library Foundation and the Gates Foundation.
I wanted to read, a friend of yours sent me a note, I love this. It was talking about you going to the Gates Foundation and that you had called her and said you were interested in throwing your hat into perhaps working with Martha's Table. And she said, I asked her if she knew that Martha's Table had a budget of only $6 million a year. The Gates Foundation at the time had about $60 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
she
per
was well.
year.
Yeah, yeah, she was well aware of that. Were you just ready to just give back in a very big way? Was that what this was about?
Well, in some ways, the biggest way I've given back was as a volunteer at the Gates Foundation, right? Because for sheer scale and the ability to organize people and ideas and motivate governments to achieve great change, there's no other chance like that chance.
Well, but resources especially.
Yes, but also just that blank sheet of paper,
right.
And to work with families so committed to the idea that everyone should have the same opportunities that we had. So that was off the charts scale. But again, even the best jobs have a sell-by date. And as Bill got ready to leave Microsoft, I knew that it was time. The kids were growing up. Melinda was investing more time at the foundation, and that it was a very good time for me to say, I'm going to go do my next thing. And the next thing was the Smithsonian. I'd become the chair of the Smithsonian, and it really was a wonderful,
Did you have to be here, though?
I didn't have to. You had to be here a lot.
But not the way you have to be here.
Not like Martha's Table.
Yeah.
And so, but it was a good transition period. And during that period while I was chairing the Smithsonian, Bill and Melinda, we wanted to get the history of why we did the things we did down. And so they hired an archivist, and I went through every email, all the meeting notes, and tried to say, why malaria? What happened there? And what changed with malaria? And why micronutrients? And what changed with that? And why small high schools? And what happened there? And so in that process of taking those 13 years and analyzing them, I looked at a lot of trends that had happened in the world over that time. And so many good things came out of that 13 years of work and are still building dividends of changes in education outcomes, changes in children's lives. But children born into poverty in the United States were still very, very stuck with low social mobility, a very big gap between their middle income peers and them, and education outcomes and lifetime income outcomes. And why was that? And that was something that we had not tackled at the Gates Foundation. And it was something that kind of brought me further back to where I began as a girl with a IU-PU Fort Wayne extension and had 2 children to put in the daycare while I finished my degree because I dropped out much earlier. But I wanted to know, why was that same trajectory not available to everyone? And in 1994, I'd gone to Martha's Table to bring computers for their new computer lab.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with the place, and had continued to be a modest donor since then, and saw it at
remember when that
McPherson
happened.
Square.
It was like manna from heaven falling down. I had a friend who was involved, and she said, Bill Gates came, and he really likes what we're doing. And it was just like getting, touched by a magic wand.
It was.
Did it stay with you? Did that play a part in your?
Sure.
And were you recruited to come do this, or did you reach out to them?
No, they
would never have thought to ask you?
No, I just, I think that would have, I had to find out who was their headhunter. I had to call one of the headhunters who'd helped me build the Gates Foundation and say, do you know who this woman is that appears to be recruiting for the for Martha's Table president? And she knew the woman and put me in touch with the woman, and I called her and said, I would like to be considered. And the woman was like,
is this April Fool's?
and then the board chair, who was Kathy Sulzberger, and I knew her brother from my work with the New York Times on these issues of global health and other issues. She was quite surprised and somewhat skeptical. I think, even one of my very best donors thought, what, a year? Well, how long will you do it? Is this just an adventure? And it's much more than that. I'm really trying to add value to the work of Martha's Table. It gives me as much as I give it.
You thought you might be viewed as a carpetbagger. Why?
Because, especially as it relates to moving to the new neighborhood, where, frankly, east of the river here in Washington, D.C., so many promises and so little consistency in terms of resources, in terms of attention, in terms of programming that really reflects what the community has asked for and needs. And we want to make sure that I and Martha's Table listen and learn and certainly bring what we're good at, but help build together and stand with, because it won't sustain unless the community that we're trying to stand with stands first.
What do you want from the city and the federal government that you aren't getting?
Well, you know, coming from Seattle and looking at DC government from afar, I expected more dysfunction and tougher relationships. It's actually, the people in DC government have been very accessible and approachable. Working with the State Department of Education, which DC has, called OSSI, they are working on early childhood improvements every day, and I'm part of the Early Childhood Commission here in town, working with the DC Department of Health that supports the Joyful Markets. They're very concerned about preventative measures, not just getting people health care, but how do we have people have the opportunity for wellness. That's pretty forward thinking for the political world. As you know, we talk more about healthcare than we do wellness. And so I do think the biggest issue facing the families we stand with are two big issues. And certainly we need to double down and continue to invest in early childhood and all forms of educational access. But without stable housing, it's very difficult to provide
whatever
the
you
kind
achieve,
of,
it's up 2 steps and back 3.
right, because children need, first and foremost, parents who are supportive of their needs. And when parents aren't supported in their needs, parents working full-time, not able to know whether they'll be able to make the rent if anything occurs, or squeezing the food budget because other items are fixed. So enriching employment, and for all of us to be able to invest more in our employees. You know, there's some innovative concepts that are out there about why can't we invest in employees the way we can invest in laptops and new buildings, and consider the investment in business and in nonprofits in capital to be in human capital as much. But that's just a straight out expense if I send you to accounting class because you're really fantastic at the numbers at the Joyful Food Market. Maybe you really should be moving on to something more. That kind of ability to invest more deeply in human capital, whether you're running a small business, a big business, or a nonprofit, is something we've all got to figure out, because we know the job world has changed a lot, and extra education and ongoing training is essential. So jobs and housing are the two things that we need even more innovation from the government. There's lots of discussion and work being done, but whether it's the district, the region, the feds, if we don't work on that living wage employment opportunities, and we don't make sure there is stable quality housing and safe neighborhoods, then all the work on education will be for naught, because if you can't have the opportunity at the end of it, and you can't have a safe and stable home, it makes it very hard to achieve, to reduce that gap between those who have and those who are born into poverty.
We only have a couple minutes left, believe it or not. This has been so fascinating. It goes so fast. But I have a couple questions. Have you given a time commitment to Martha's Table? Is it like either another year, another 2 years, another 5 years, or you leave it open-ended?
You can tell from the color of my hair that there is obviously work at Martha's Table all the time to be building new leaders to make sure that when the time comes for me to pass the baton, that Martha's Table is in good financial and programmatic and leadership shape. So we work on that all the time, especially when you've got a volunteer as a leader.
But you're not answering my question, but that's
no, but
okay.
I don't know the answer
Well, I
yet.
think that's the answer.
Yeah,
you haven't put a timetable on it.
This move is so
Consuming
important.
you. Yeah.
But I have grandchildren and a wonderful life, and so obviously I don't want to be the first in and the last out forever.
Well, so this goes to my next question. San Francisco, Indiana, Redmond, Washington, D.C. Where do you live? What's your legal residence?
Oh, it's absolutely Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C.
I don't own any real estate outside of this region.
Okay, well that kind of answers the next question I wanted to ask, because unfortunately, because of the city we live in, it's a bit of a dead end. But have you thought of political office? It would seem to me that you would just be a natural. I mean, seriously.
I think
I'm
Martha
not blowing
would do
smoke.
better, huh? Perhaps. No, because you know what? I like people to like me, and even
Come
the
on, not all politicians are just.
well, I mean, you get in with 51% of the vote. What's that about? I want it all, right?
Well, you might change it. Are you politically active? Do you get behind candidates?
You know, because Michael is a journalist, we're very careful
We
about
should
that.
say she's married to
Michael Kinsley, who is a
journalist.
fabulous and
Yes.
wonderful journalist.
We weren't hiding that, but
Yeah. So we're very careful
just didn't
about
have room
that.
to bring him up.
But yes, I personally do support some candidates. I've not been out front in any campaign for obvious reasons. And again, I've been lucky enough to work with political leaders around the world now, so I do have a sense of the ones that can get it done for us and the ones who can't.
As I said, our time's up, and as I also said, even if you wanted to run for political office in D.C., the options are.
And I love our mayor, so I'm willing to
well,
settle with
maybe
that.
you're the one to get us statehood.
Yeah.
Well, Patty, it's been great. Let's try to do
Thank
this
you,
again.
Carol. I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad we finally did it. Thank you to the audience here, to the audience at home, and we'll see you at the next Q&A Cafe. Thank you.